So early last month, during the ANC's community nomination processes, unknown gunmen opened fire during a public meeting, killing 3 women in Inanda outside Durban. Tamim Nguni, the candidate who was eventually nominated to stand as a councillor, has since gone into hiding, fearing for his life. ANC councillor in Cato Crest, outside Durban, Siyabonga Mkhize, was gunned down. 2 days later, on Saturday, EFF councillor candidate Thulani Shangase was also gunned down in Pietermaritzburg. This is worrisome, considering that police recorded 33 politically linked murders in the province of KwaZulu-Natal between January 2016 and June 2017. 33. Discussing this with us and other developments around political killings are representatives from the 3 main political parties in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. We have Nhlakanipho Ntombela from the ANC, Joshua Mazibuko from the IFP. He's a member of the National Executive Committee there, and the DA's Zwakele Mncwango will also join us, as well as the political analyst Sipho Seepe. They now join me for that conversation. All right, thank you for joining me. So I suppose let me start with you, Mr. Ntombela, from the ANC. And I do that purely because in many instances it is members from your party that find themselves, you know, on the wrong end of the spectre of political violence. And I think we're getting to a point where many of us are tired of trying to diagnose what is this problem about. But I think you can do broad brush strokes of what are we dealing with here? Why are we seeing political activists killed? What are some of the main features from your understanding over the years?
Thank you for the opportunity to assist. We think on our view it's a pure criminality. What happened in Inanda, those were ordinary supporters of the ANC, old women, coming to cast their vote for the preferred candidate. And then a car came by, a drive-by shooting. 3 of them were shot on the scene. So it's pure criminality of those individuals who wanted to disrupt the ANC process, but clearly there was a political agenda behind that as it happened. We're still not certain exactly as what happened in Ward 101, because according to the reports we received, they'd done everything. They'd finished political campaign. They were sitting in a car on that day, and it so happened that whoever came, 3 or 4 individuals, they shot at the councillor candidate. Comrade Sia was a candidate standing for the elections for 2021 elections on behalf of the ANC. So, but it tells you that the reality that KZN has got a challenge of a number of illegal firearms. It has got a challenge of the police not doing their work promptly in capping these killings. I'm saying this because since the killing of Inanda, which happened in broad daylight, nobody has been brought to book up until now.
All right. So thank you for those opening thoughts. Let me bring Joshua Mazibuko from the IFP into this conversation. We talk, Mr. Mazibuko, about intra-party violence as it relates to, for instance, you know, the African National Congress and the criminality that Mr. Ntombela raises. But I imagine that as a party rooted in KwaZulu-Natal and with the history, you know, that we all know of and are aware of violence in the province, and subsequently incidents that at times go beyond, you know, activists that are in the ANC. What has been your understanding as the IFP? What are we dealing with here?
Thank you very much, Magoja and my colleagues, the panelists. Indeed, I agree with what Mr. Ntombela has said, insofar as the killings are concerned. Indeed, it's a fact there are political killings. But you see, we're saying that because that is the only thought that comes to mind when a person who is involved politically is killed. But at the same time, people are multifaceted, have multifaceted identities. You know, I'm a member of the IFP. I'm a man also. I'm a supporter of Kaizer Chiefs. These are my identities. So if I get killed, because I'm perhaps prominent politically, the first thing that will come to my family is it is political. But there may be other factors that may have led to my killing. So, but as he says, what complicates the whole situation is that law enforcement agencies are not swift in acting and arresting the potential criminals. Now, that gives the community, relatives, and those who love the one who's died, because they are mourning, they tend to now think that they must take the law into their own hands. They have perceptions of who might be responsible. So in that sense, government fails us, or precisely law enforcement agencies. But I must say, as I've said, political killings are there. And, you know, both political killings and pure criminality, those who engage in this get confidence in that they may not be arrested because of the inefficiency of law enforcement agencies. And again, because now there's a tendency to silence potential witnesses through the barrel of the gun. So this complicates the whole situation. The government carries a major responsibility to ensure that it steps up a gear in terms of rooting out violence in all its forms.
All right. Thank you for your first take there, Mr. Mazibuko. Let me bring in Professor Sipho Seepe. Prof. Seepe, a number of factors being brought to the fore. The availability of firearms in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, inefficiencies in law enforcement, but also I heard the talk about, you know, people are multidimensional. There could be other factors at play, and in some instances, sheer criminality, but also the history of KwaZulu-Natal. Anything else that we are leaving out in trying to understand this beast that we are dealing with, that we so easily pack into a box and label political killings?
Well, I think first we must not move away from the reality of political killings. But it's also important to understand that those occur within a particular society. We are a crime-ridden society. We are also a violent society. Any form of protest that we have tends to end up with a form of violence, whether it's within parties and between parties. And as Mr. Mazibuko was also saying, that we also have tensions that manifest themselves because of the multi-identities that we have. I mean, it's not uncommon also that even in a sports field, something that is supposed to bring joy among contestants and all the fans, you will sometimes end up with tensions that will lead to killings and crimes. So we must accept that if society tends to be violent, members of the society will also tend to be that violent. I mean, the destruction of property is a form of violence. The language that we use, where we insult each other, that's not a language of inviting for a dialogue. As soon as people start insulting each other, as it happens in politics, sooner the insult become, they express themselves in a language of violence and end up in violence. So the first thing that we fail to do as a society, not only with political parties, is to understand that we have a history of violence, a history where the state was a sponsor of that violence. Secondly, we also have a tendency from the state also, when we want to encourage a particular behavior, take the lockdowns. As soon as we thought about lockdowns, the immediate reaction was bring the defense force, bring the police. So our approach has always been around brute force. So we are a society that engender this form of violence. When young people at universities protest, you end up with destruction of property, and the police are called, and again, you have endemic violence in our society. So that is the first thing that we must deal with, the societal issue. Then you also have intra-party violence, where members of parties or parties have not been able to inculcate the culture of tolerance, of difference within themselves. So if they cannot even inculcate a culture of tolerance within a party, you will also find that violence can express itself between parties. But what we see now, as we move towards local elections, we tend to see more intra-party violence. And this is one of the things that is a testament to our failure to say the idea of a democratic culture, which expressed in terms of difference of opinion, canvassing, has seen itself already in that ugly side of our society, which is a violent society.
Let me bring in Zwakele Mncwango from the DA. And I know that you are deeply rooted yourself within the province of KwaZulu-Natal. As a political activist, how safe or unsafe do you feel? And not only you, but also your colleagues. What are some of the concerns that you have, Zwakele, as you hit the campaign trail? For instance, do you deal with situations where some areas are considered no-go areas?
Yeah, thanks. Afternoon to you and the viewers and the panel. Let me first start by saying we're coming from a history of violence in this province and a high level of political intolerance. But one must say that we have now arrived to a stage where we are able to campaign freely, although there are still areas where it's still difficult. But one can safely say there are no more no-go areas in this province. But one must also go back to say, where is the problem, Thulasizwe? And I think my colleagues, the two colleagues there, they missed the point when they say it's poor criminality. And I think we mustn't move away from the reality that this province, in 2016, through the former Premier Wilson Tunu, commissioned Morane Commission. There is a report which really have overwhelming evidence and findings as to what exactly is a cause of these killings in the province. And the main recommendation and the finding there was that tender system is the cause of political murderers in this province. So we mustn't deviate away from that report. The big question, Thulasizwe, we must address why the recommendations are not being implemented, because we spent millions of rands diagnosing exactly what is the problem in the province and why people are killing each other. And it became clear to us that most of the recent killings are actually internally, which we spoke about intra-party problems and intolerance. It's all about resources and mainly in municipalities. To a point, to us, as members of parliament, it's rare you hear member of parliament being killed. It's mainly councillors, because that's where members or politicians are close to resources. So the issue here is about the fight of resources in municipalities. And if we fail to diagnose the problem, we'll never solve it. So that is why it's important that if we have this panel, we are honest to ourselves, we are honest towards a problem. And Babu Ntombela, for example, need to be honest to himself and say the government in this province has failed under ANC because they failed to implement recommendation by Morane Commission. The question is why we spend so much money of tax money without even implementing even a single recommendation. They must ask themselves those introspection, why we are not doing so.
All right, Zwakele Mncwango, I will take that point directly to Nhlakanipho Ntombela when we return here on the Intel. This is the Intel, and we're discussing issues of political killings with a particular focus in KwaZulu-Natal. But as you've been hearing in our headlines this afternoon into the evening, there have been incidents that have happened even outside of KwaZulu-Natal. We've had an incident, at least one killing in Gauteng, and also now a report of someone who's been killed in the northwest in the area of Rustenburg.